Y'all, how y'all doing? Good morning, good morning. Federal Reserve Act signed into law December 23rd, 1913. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act of December 1913, culminating 3 years of a discussion and a debate over the development of a central bank. With nation confronting another financial crisis in 1907, the United States, the only one of the world's major financial powers without a central bank, the nation was forced to turn to Wall Street. Finance mogul J.P. Morgan bailed the government out of a financial crisis in 1895, organized private sector investments and lines of credit to stabilize the banking system amid its latest panic. Recognizing that the nation could not continue to rely on wealthy individuals to stem an economic financial crisis, Congress passed the Aldrich-Vreeland Act on May 30th, 1908. The legislation provided for the issuance of the emergency currency, created the 18-member National Monetary Commission, chaired by Sen. Nelson Aldrich, to determine what changes were necessary to the nation's monetary system and laws related to banking and currency. Over the next 3 years, the commission traveled to major capitals of Europe, hosted a number of hearings in the United States. In January 1911, Aldrich unveiled a plan that, after a year of revision by the commission, was presented to Congress in 1912, called for National Reserve Association. Although the bill did not come forward, only until 1912 it had been underdeveloped for years. Going back at November 1910, meeting investment banker Paul Warburg, Treasury official Abram P. Andrew, others on Jekyll Island, Georgia. The then secret meeting was organized by financiers and bankers who recognized the nation's need for central bank and wanted to begin the process. Because they did not think the public would welcome a plan crafted in part by bankers, they made extraordinary efforts to keep the meeting secret, using only first names and telling others they were on a duck hunting trip. Aldrich's proposal. This was attacked by committees in both chambers for giving too little control of the government and too much power to bankers, especially those who ran the largest institutions, amongst other features. The plan called for a 46-member board, with only 6 appointed by the government, and one of those, the head of the organization, selected from a list of 3 names supplied by the association. Unlike the first and second bank of the United States, the government would have no stake in the National Reserve Association. After the 1912 election, the chance of Aldrich's plan had a success to be was gone. Opposition to the proposal was a plank in the Democratic platform, with Democratic Woodrow Wilson winning the presidential election and Democrats holding control of both houses. The banking community, which had strongly backed the Aldrich plan, became anxious about what the plan of new administration would propose. The banking the House Banking and Currency Committee assigned a subcommittee under the leadership of Representative Carter Glass to explore reform proposals. Glass. He quickly enlisted the help of Henry Parker Willis, a professor at Washington and Lee University. Willis also wrote for the New York Journal of Commerce. Wood come to wield enormous influence over the subcommittee, whose members had little knowledge of banking and finance. The legislation Glass introduced had some aspect in common with Aldrich's plan. There were some major differences. Now, while Aldrich would have created a central body, the Glass bill provided for a system of regional banks. Glass, in fact, favored as many as 20 regional banks throughout the country and did not like the idea of a central coordinating board. Glass also believed firmly in the autonomous regional banks, later writing in a memoir, "In the United States, with its immense area, numerous natural divisions, still more numerous competing divisions, and abundant outlets to foreign countries, there is no argument, either of banking theory or of expediency, which dictates the creation of a single central banking institution, no matter how skillfully managed, how carefully controlled, or how patriotically conducted." Glass also did not like the idea of government control. Like Aldrich, his plan gave most of the authority to the bankers. Wilson, however, felt the plan needed an oversight agency. He also believed strongly that neither Congress nor public would support a proposal that gave the government little control. Early on, Glass had suggested that the comptroller of currency perform a coordinating function over the system, but Wilson favored a central board. A provision created the Federal Reserve Board, added to exercise supervisory authority over the banks. It was made up entirely in presidential appointees, either ex officio members because of cabinet position or appointees to the board for specific terms. To provide bankers with a voice, Wilson also created the Federal Advisory Council, a group of 12 bankers elected by the regional bank that would occasionally meet with the board. Much of the early congressional criticism of the bill focused on the fact that Glass's subcommittee had largely done its work secretly, with Republicans having little involvement in crafting the legislation. More substantive debate, however, focused on the issues of control, especially the power of central board in the Senate. The debate was generally much more informed and varied than in the House, with senators generally favoring the centralization. Support also began to emerge for a measure offered by Oklahoma Democratic Senior Robert L. Owen, which was similar to the House bill, but a few changes, such as limiting the number of reserve banks to no more than 12. Wow. Owen also removed the Secretary of Agriculture and Comptroller of Currency from the Federal Reserve Board and changed the capital of the system to 6% of the member bank's capital and surplus from 20% of capital in the House bill. Move was seen as favorable to the smaller banks, and Owen's bill prevailed. There were certainly differences between the final bills that passed both chambers, but they had much in common. Matters worked out in committee, including the number of reserve banks, which ended up specifying between 8 and 12, and the makeup of the Federal Reserve Board, including the return of the Comptroller of Currency to the board. As far as the terms for the Federal Reserve governors, they agreed on staggered terms and extended them from 6 to 8 years in the approved bills to 10 to ensure no president could appoint all governors during the two-term presidency. The Federal Reserve Act was signed by President Wilson on December 23, 1913. I'm going to reread that previous paragraph. Owen was removed from the Secretary of Agriculture and the Comptroller of Currency from the Federal Reserve Board, changed the capital of the system to 6% of member banks' capital, and the surplus from 20% of capital in the House bill. The more you seen as favorable to small banks, and Owen's bill prevailed. So a bibliography, Gas Carter was an adventure in a constructive finance New York Doubleday page encounter 1927, available on FRASCR. Adapted from Todd Tim, The Federal Reserve Act and the Balance of Power, Political Fight for an Independent Central Bank, 1790, present, 915, Kansas City, Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, 2012, available online. West Robert Craig, Banking Reform, Federal Reserve, 1863-1923, Ithaca Cornell University Press, 1974, Wicker, Elmer's Great Debate on Banking Reform, Nelson Aldrich and the Origins of the Fed, Ohio State University Press, written November 22nd, 2013, see disclaimer and update policy. Related people, Carter Glass, ex officio chairman, and Paul M. Warburg, vice governor, vice chair, Federal Reserve Board from 1916 to 1918. Carter Glass was there from 1918 to 1920. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Peace.